Hello and welcome to my channel. My name is Lynn and today I am going to make the Trinket box. This is an older Eileen Hall scoreboards die from Sizzix, and scoreboards dies are a little bit interesting. They're sort of made in the style of a Biggs die, so you don't need the platform base. It has that thickness already built into it. And the reason for that is so that you can actually cut through thicker materials like mat board, which is what I'm cutting through here. I bought this, actually it was a pretty big box of mat board, which usually is actually used to mat photos. Like when you get your photos professionally framed, usually you can kind of pick and choose between different colors of mats that you might like to border your art or your photograph with. And so these boards are really nice. They're big size. I cut them down with this old trimmer that I have here, and because it's so thick, it doesn't actually cut through in one pass. Similar to when I cut through medium weight chipboard, all I do is I just cut it from the one side and then I flip it over to the back and I cut it from the back side. Now, what I'm doing here is measuring out everything, each of the different pieces, because on this scoreboards die, which I think is the, I don't know, I can't remember if it's an XL or just an L. I think it's XL, so it's extra long. You'll want either a extended cutting plate, or if you have a large wide machine like the Platinum or the Sizzix, I think, is it the Sizzix Pro? You can use one of those plates at the bottom too. But the width of this will go through a standard sort of 6-inch opening. So you don't necessarily need the larger A4 platform die cutting machines. And I'm cutting down my mat board so that I have just individual pieces and I can focus on one section of the die at a time and just place the mat board over the section that I want to use. Today I'll be using Graphic 45, 'Twas the Night Before Christmas. This is a deluxe collector's edition, and I have it in both the 8x8 and 12x12. I'm trying to figure out, technically the 8x8 will work for the section that I am wanting to cut right now, but it doesn't quite cover my mat board, which I've cut so that it's larger than what I need. That way I don't have to be overly precise when I go to position this over that section of the scoreboard's die. The nice thing about the mat board collection that I purchased, and if I can still find it on Amazon, I'll link to it in the description box below along with everything else that I'm using. But it's cool because on one side it's already colored, and the set comes with a really nice variety of colors. So that's really fantastic because you don't actually have to line both sides of your mat board with patterned paper if you don't want. You can just use the colored portion, and it looks nice and finished. So what I'm doing is lining edge to edge with my strong score tape. Any double-sided adhesive would probably work okay, but since I'm making a Trinket box, which I'm hoping will kind of be kept and not just thrown out, I do want everything to last and be nice and have a nice good finish to it. So I'm lining all of my chipboard pieces with score tape, but on the side that is white, because that's the side that I will adhere my pattern paper to. So I'm giving a quick burnish, but truthfully, when you run this through your die cutting machine, that's going to apply quite a lot of pressure, and it will for sure ensure that the double-sided dry adhesive makes really, really good contact with the pattern papers. And so it's once I get all of my papers chosen and attached to my mat board pieces, I'll go ahead and start die cutting each of these elements. Now, a couple of other things about scoreboards dies. They, besides being like your regular Biggs die, which has that thickness and the extra strong blade that can cut through thicker materials, as the name would suggest, a scoreboards die actually has additional metal or something embedded in that thick foam that it's not quite as where it's positioned, it will actually score your materials rather than actually cut straight through them. So that's kind of a bit of a unique feature. So it will actually cut and score in one go. And one of the things that I've noticed when you're working with something like a mat board, and really anything, I guess, that has that bit of thickness to it. So mat board, it's really just a lot of compressed paper. And so when it's cut through, even though the particular mat boards that I'm using have a nice colored finish on one side, the core of it is still white. Because it's just a lot of layers of white mat board or paper, I should say. And that's nice for when you are matting, let's say, a photo, and they have that nice angled sort of miter cut where you see the white core of the photo mat surrounding your photo. It's a nice little accent that borders your photo. But on dimensional projects like these, you might not want that white showing. So that's one thing to kind of be aware of, that you might want to find or plan for some way of addressing that white core, because there's quite a bit of thickness to it. It's rather prominent. So just be aware of that. And you can do things like inking through it. You could gesso maybe, and then paint as well if you wanted to cover that white. But that's one thing. The other thing that to be kind of cognizant of, because everybody's machine might be a little bit different, is that when you run this through, here's where I make a big mistake. So this die is made so that you can actually insert an oval magnetic die that will cut out an oval. So I actually had to do this over again. So I'll show you take two, because what you are supposed to actually do is, if you're not going to use that magnetic spacer die in this open area here, you need to use this little guy. This is just a magnetic, I think it's 1 inch by 1 inch magnetic, it's not a die, it's just the foam, but it's at the correct thickness so that when you die cut your piece, it will actually help to eject or pop out that die cut piece. My first die cut, because I didn't actually put that spacer piece in, it was stuck in that well. And the only way to really get that out that I could find was to actually ruin that piece. I had to like use a pokey tool and pierce through it in order to pry it out. So that's one thing to definitely be aware of when you have that little spacer in. It might seem like it's stuck, but it will eventually pop out, at least on one edge. And then you can do what I'm doing here, just slide something under that one edge as soon as you get a little bit of a gap, and then you can prise that out. So I repositioned my little spacer so that it's a little bit closer to the edge. That way it encourages it to pop up, at least in that corner. And I did notice when I ran this through the first time that my mat board shifted a little bit. Thankfully, I still got a full die cut, but if you're worried about your mat shifting, you may want to tape it down like I did here. And you can see spacing that little spacer piece closer to the edge helped that pop up almost immediately. So that was definitely one thing that I completely forgot about, because it's been a while since I've made one of these Trinket boxes, and it's just been a while since I've used my scoreboards dies too. So I often forget that that aspect of it. Okay, so then now with this particular die, you will need to cut 2 of the largest pieces. Those are going to be the front and back covers. And you could use this to make a box. You could use this to make a mini album. I have a separate tutorial from a while back where I made a little baby mini album using this. But today I'll be making the box form. And so you'll want, to cut 2 of these side pieces, and each of the side pieces covers or spans 2 of the 4 sides, and then they each have a glue tab on the side to connect them together, and 2 glue tabs at the bottom so that you can adhere it to the bottom of the box. So I'm going to use a little bit of Graphic 45 ink to actually ink all of these white core edges that are exposed. That way it looks a little bit more seamless, and you just don't see that white. And so that's sort of easy to do on the sides, but where you have the score lines or the folds, it's a little bit tougher to get all the way down in there. So what I ended up doing was taking a black marker, and I actually drew inside those folds, and that helped me get black all the way into to cover all of the white. And that helps a lot. And then I just continue to ink the nice red ink over it. So you'll still see black. The ink isn't going to completely cover the black, but it just helps to kind of blend that in a little bit and soften the black a little. Okay, so here is not mistake, but just a change in directions. So this piece here is the spine. You only need 1 of them. And one thing that is tough with the spine is that you do want it to curve, and it does put in the exact same score lines as you see on the edges of the box sides. And so there's going to be a lot of that white core showing. And what I tried to do was cut my pattern paper separately so that it doesn't actually cut through my paper, but it still did. So sometimes when you're cutting with your scoreboard's dies, thinner materials may not actually score because the blade that does the scoring is recessed a little bit further in than the cutting blade. And sometimes with thinner materials, you may not actually get the scoring. It's still scored through my paper. So my plan B then was to just cut a piece of, it was originally called paper leather, but now I think a lot of places call it paper fabric. Sizzix calls theirs texture rolls. They're sold on rolls, so it's called textures paper, I think, or surfaces. I'm not sure. And so you can find it. Craftex is another brand that sells them. Essentially, what it is, it's still a paper material, but it's very, very durable. It is basically the same material as if you buy jeans that have that little tag, the little paper tag sewn to the back as the brand. It's basically that same material. You can wash it, you can crumple it for different effects. It's very tear resistant, and it's just very durable. So if you're looking to add some durability to a project where you're expecting a bit of wear and tear, it's a great product, and it's sold in a variety of different colors. In fact, Sizzix has them in pastel, like fun colors too, not just your basic kind of craft white and black. They sell it in pastels and lots of fun colors. So what I did was, instead of using mat board for that spine area, I've decided to use just hand cut to the same size some of my paper leather. And I think I do have the Sizzix one from a while ago. Now with the sides, this is really easy to assemble. You just want to attach the two side pieces so that you have all four sides connected by the glue tabs. And I'm using a combination of my strong score tape. You could use maybe a red line tape as well if you wanted, and some liquid adhesive just to make sure this is a nice permanent bond, because I do want to make sure that it's something that somebody, if they wanted to keep, which I hope that they would, to just keep, their little trinkets, that it would kind of stand the test of time. So again, I'm using the grid mat to line my two cover pieces up, and I'm gonna attach them to my paper leather piece here. And for the back cover, I actually chose the green as the outside. So the color side of my mat board is the outside. And on the inside, I just, after I inked the sides to cover up the white core, I just inked a little bit in as well, because most of it's going to get covered up by the box itself, which again, I used a combination of score tape and liquid adhesive. And the reason for using both is the double-sided adhesive tape I can get all the way to the edge, and that way I know I have a nice good stick all the way around. But the liquid adhesive gives me a little bit of wiggle room and will be a permanent hold. Now, since I had this extra piece that I messed up on, I decided to use it to actually fill the gap in the middle of the bottom here. That gap is created by the glue tabs from the sides of our box, and mat board is rather thick, so it's a pretty big gap there. And by just filling it in with some scraps, that just helps when I put this piece here to cover up all of the glue tabs and make the inside of the box nice and finished. It gives me a nice solid surface to glue this down onto. So this is going to be really well secured. I'm not too worried about there being any sort of it caving in or anything like that, because the mat board is so thick. Even with different levels of dimension, even if I didn't fill in that gap, I think you would still get a really nice level finish on the inside there. But I filled the gap in mostly because I had the extra scrap piece, but also because it just gives me more surface area to glue that bottom piece down into. Otherwise, it would only be glued to the glue tabs from the sides of the box. Okay, so then all that's left is to decorate the front of the box, which I'm keeping rather simple. So I've taken a chipboard element from this DCE and some gorgeous trim, also from Graphic 45. And that's going to be pretty much the main bit of decoration. Now, this piece of stretchy cording that I have is actually left over from the traveler's notebook that I created recently. I'll link to that video in the upper right hand corner if you want to check that out. But basically, I took a pre-made traveler's notebook from Graphic 45 and then I created a sleeve for it. And when I created my sleeve, I created a different closure, a magnetic closure. So this bit of cording was actually the original closure for the pre-made album. Now, here's a bit of don't do what I did. It was a disaster, but it also wasn't it didn't really play out the way I was hoping. Okay, so I wanted this to use this wax seal. This is from Spellbinders. It's part of their new Sealed by Spellbinders collection. And look at that mess that I've made. So I wanted to temporarily secure the ends of my cording, and that way I can have that exactly where I wanted. And I used a little, just like a little glue dot, to keep that tacked down. But I want this to be a really strong hold, a really strong bond, because it's going to be our closure, and there's going to be a lot of tension with having to pull that elastic cording around the box. And so I wanted to use something strong like hot glue. Well, hot glue melts things. Clearly, I did not think that through, and it melted the original adhesive. So that's when you saw it kind of my elastic band spring open. The other thing is that just be careful if you do use hot glue, which I don't super recommend. And you want to place a real wax seal over it. Give your hot glue a few seconds to actually cool down a little bit, because otherwise it'll melt your wax. And I wanted it to melt the wax seal a little bit just to increase the bond, but you just want to, it's a fine line between melting it a little and potentially melting right through it. In the end, I used my 3D Kalal all-purpose glue to level that off, and I should have just used that, but I sometimes like to use hot glue so that things set a lot faster and I can complete the project or move on to the next step. And so just be aware. I wouldn't recommend it, but I made it work and it wasn't a total disaster. I hope that you enjoyed this video, and if you are already subscribed to my channel, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. If you want to catch new videos as I publish them, consider subscribing and ringing that notification bell. Thank you again. Until next time, happy crafting and have a fantastic day. Bye.